It would, it's not that they're unwilling, it's just that at the moment it's so unclear about in what way and what it's like, fine, if later on, I mean, we aren't gonna spend this money for, a long time before this wrecking ball ever goes. I've talked with the attorney. So if they come in later on and say, hey, we better, if they come in later on and say that they
you got to control. You can use control. You do. You can't control it. It's disappointing. You can't control it.
do you want to start off that conversation since you've been most closely being what I anticipate is what I talked to Stephanie is what I envision is doing two motions. Motion to authorize attorneys to move forward issuing necessary, taking necessary action to file with the courts and then a second motion which would authorize the town administrator and the attorney.
Chris, you got me a muffin. I did. You're welcome.
I already grabbed it.
To spend, ultimately spend up to $50,000 plus whatever attorney's fees have been spent to date for the actual demolition and some new landscaping of the property, and just give them a monetary authorization up to
What's the price of the demolition?
Stephanie's got all that. We've got a couple bids, about 35 or so was the.
And that brings it down to earth. It'll be ground.
Yeah, then we have to, what we have to do to make the earth look nice.
Because it would have a scar over the driveway.
So I'm thinking 50 grand plus the fees we've paid for attorneys.
Well, is that a one-off or is that a constant?
No, and what I've, and I'll talk about this, I'll summarize the conversations I've had with the Conservancy, the Community Association,
It
others.
doesn't sound like anybody's
Nothing
biting.
came out of, nobody's willing to help us out. But what I will make clear is once we have demolished it, the town's responsibility is done. Under the Keeper rules and regulations, under the deed and covenants to the island, the ARB and the Community Association share the responsibility and they have the legal authority to deal with the property owner with respect to landscaping, maintenance, or so if the property owners understand, don't come back, once it's gone, don't
To
come
me,
back.
that's put a lien on the property.
Now, what the attorney's going to tell you is that, which I didn't understand, and you will know better than I do, is that liens are not bulletproof. That we should assume the likelihood that at some point down the road, 5 or 10 years ago, someone will challenge the validity of that lien.
In what sense? I mean, anybody can challenge anything.
Well, I'll let him, and he's going to be here, so.
Is it Dwayne or somebody?
No, it's Chris Murphy.
I mean, as I said, you can challenge anything.
Yeah.
What's the likelihood? That's not correct.
All right. All right.
Well,
All right, let's go ahead and,
Dwayne.
Dwayne,
Dwayne.
are you sitting up here with us?
Oh, sorry.
Dwayne, 10 o'clock, it's 10 o'clock, Dwayne.
Sorry about that.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would everybody join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, was that? All right. And as everyone can see, John Wilson is on vacation, so he will not be here today, so there are the four of us. Let me start with the approval of minutes for the Town Council meeting of July 3rd, 2018. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any changes, comments,
No.
anything?
None.
Petra, they're perfect. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Okay. Mayor's update, I have nothing of substance to add today, except if some people are not aware, the sentencing for our former town administrator and our former treasurer has been scheduled for 2 o'clock this afternoon at the federal courthouse in Charleston. I will be there representing the town, and we certainly, I have no idea what's going to transpire, but we certainly will communicate that to the community once it's taken place. Beyond that, I have no other comments this month. Citizens comments. Any citizens comments on items that are actually on the agenda?
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. I realize that today is an exception, not just in the time of the meeting, but the fact that there are more people in the audience than are usually here.
Which we appreciate, by the way.
But well, it's nice for me to have company. But my suggestion is that when it becomes necessary, such as it did today, for the meeting time to be changed, if you run a banner across the top of was it there? Because I didn't see it. Okay. Because it also, with that banner there, even if it's something that doesn't change, the day of the meeting or the day before to run a banner, it might encourage people. You're going to be stuck with me until the house sells, but it might encourage other people who might not ordinarily come to a meeting to show up. So just a suggestion.
Appreciate that. Okay. And as you've probably figured out, the reason that we moved this meeting forward is because I need to be at the court proceeding, and we have obviously another very important matter today on the agenda that we did not want to reschedule to a different day, so that's why we've moved it. Any other citizens' comments? Okay. With that, we'll move to the consent. We have the second reading of ordinance 2018-109. It was approved last month at first reading. Since it's on the consent agenda, it does not require a motion. All in favor of approval?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Old business, we have none, so new business. First item A is to consider approval of the CARTA proposed 2019 fiscal year budget. And Andrea, right?
Yes, sir.
I didn't get your last name.
Kozlowski.
Kozlowski is with CARTA, and just for the record, in case people are not aware, Kika does have a seat, participates, because we do not have a lot of. I'm sorry?
I said you said Kika. I
said
said
Kika. See, because I got Shannon here. That was embarrassing. I mean, I went through my old Kika days when I saw Shannon sitting out there. So. Yeah. The town, while we do not have a lot of CARTA business out here, we do have a seat and participate on the CARTA board, and as consequently have a role with respect to CARTA and their business and their budget. Stephanie Tillerson attends as my proxy the majority of CARTA meetings, so we're glad you could be here today.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
Good morning. I believe provided to you in your packet was a cover memo that kind of described line by line the items in the budget and any changes that were presented to you this year. One of the big projects that we have, and the budget is changing pretty drastically, is the Intermodal Center in North Charleston. That will be opened in February of next year, so I hope you all will join us for a ribbon cutting ceremony. But the budget this fiscal year will not reflect any of the Intermodal Center costs, because that project will be closed out in the next fiscal year. Besides that, the Low Country Rapid Transit, which is the bus rapid transit line that we will be applying for federal grants, will be the next big project that we have occurring at CARTA. But we're making many system improvements, technology improvements since the BCD Council of Governments has taken over. We've replaced all the cameras on the buses. We're installing 62 shelters in the next few weeks. They're supposed to be here tomorrow. So, and we have 40 benches slated to be installed as well throughout the service area. So if anybody has any questions about the budget.
I'm curious, what's the current experience with the hospitality, the downtown hospitality route? And what
That ridership is about 250 people a day are using that service, so it has definitely shown a need for it. Of course, budget is the big issue at CARTA's next board meeting. They'll have to decide how to fund that moving forward. The board gave us directive to give it about 6 months and see if any private donors stepped up in the hospitality industry to provide funding for that. And so far they have not. So they'll have to decide if they can cut service in other areas or find a way to continue funding that route. But they have demonstrated that the need is there. So we hope to be able to continue service.
I mean, we all know that Johns Island is developing very quickly, and particularly, you know, inside the urban growth boundary, the areas that Charleston's responsible for. Do you have any sense of what is likely to occur over the next several years, if anything, with respect to extending or adding routes from Charleston and into Johns Island?
Yes, so Tri-County Link services Johns Island. And so what we're looking at moving forward, hopefully in the next few years, is combining both Tri-County Link and CARTA together to have one regional transit system for the entire 3-county region. So we do anticipate increasing ridership and routes coming to and from Johns Island. We've had discussions with several of the resorts on Kiowa Island about transporting workers to and from the island, because that's a big concern of theirs, is to be able to get their workers back and forth. So we do anticipate some increased service on Johns Island.
And I know that's been and that's why I asked about the downtown hospitality, because I know Roger's had conversations with CARTA on a number of occasions, and I think the challenge is still that, you know, we have the same issue everyone else does of how to get help for all of our different retail businesses in Kiowa and Seabrook, but they originate in so many different places.
Well, that is the issue, is where could we have a park and ride lot somewhere out in the outlying areas, and that's what we're seeing all over the region. Really, is, you know, real estate is tight and there's not a whole lot of places for park and ride lots. So we're conducting a whole regional park and ride study right now to determine locations of where there's potential park and ride lots, even if it's not for CARTA service at the moment, for carpooling or van pooling or ride sharing of some sort. So that is something that we are studying currently.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council?
How much funding are you looking for the downtown? When you're talking about the hop?
It's about $1 million a year to run that service.
So is that normal, you would think, to run any kind of?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, the hourly rate through our contractor doesn't change. That service, we're looking at streamlining a little bit. It runs from 6 a.m. till 3 a.m. And we have ridership numbers that show that no one's really getting on it after midnight. So we're going to look in September to streamline that and cut costs down a little bit. But it's right around $1 million a year.
All right, so you just need an action by us to
Yes, sir.
approve? Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 2019 CARTA budget as provided in Exhibit 3?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Any conversation, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate it. With that, we'll move to new business item B, which is to consider approval to proceed with demolition and consider acquisition of a property located at 122 Turnberry Drive. And I'm going to let Chris, if you would sort of take okay. You've been the one, I think, in the council who's been most involved with this for a long period of time, so I'll let you.
Well, I think most council members are aware of what's been transpiring. I got involved in this about a year ago, I think. I see a number of Turnberry residents here. And it's been a very slow process, and it's a slow process by design, because we are dealing with the property of an individual. The town's made repeated efforts to make contact with the owner and with a lien holder to no avail. The lawyers have worked, Dwayne and I assume this is Christopher over here, is that correct? And I would ask that one or both of you speak to some of the issues that we've got. But at this point, we believe we've gone through the process to get the property condemned. Council walked through it last week. We would agree it's in need of condemnation, at least I would. I certainly, based on the reactions of the other council members.
You almost need a hazmat suit to be in there, so.
It's really unbelievable. I know it's vermin infested, and it's really become a danger to the neighborhood in terms of potential danger in case of a child walking near or around any of the house. You could fall through the decking. So I would ask at this point if Dwayne or Christopher could talk as to where we are in the legal process and then what the options are for council to proceed.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. And I want to start off by thanking not only Chris, but the residents of Turnberry and everyone else for their patience during this process. By design, Chris, you're exactly right. It's a process that there's hoops that a municipality has to jump through because it is considered a takings under the Constitution. So one of the jobs as legal counsel that we had to make sure was that we followed the statute to the letter so that there would be no town liability for an improper taking of the property. But as many of you know who've been following closely, we filed the condemnation action in January. The purpose was to get to the point where we are now, where we could have options to council for demolition of the property. And I know that what most folks are interested in is the timeline as where do we go from here. We filed the summons and complaint. There was no response by either the landowner or a mortgage holder who lives in Seabrook, or lived in Seabrook, I should say. Going through the process, we're at the point of the process now where we file for summary judgment and serve by publication to put on notice that we will be demolishing the building. And for that process, I have would love to introduce all of you to a colleague of mine, Christopher Murphy. He's an attorney with Resnick and Lewis, has many years of experience in the condemnation and eminent domain area. And I'll just turn over, Chris, the podium to you to explain the timeline from here until demolition actually occurs, and also the process, so that we would have information for council on what to vote for today with regard to demolition of the building.
All right, thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, folks, for having me. And feel free while I'm going through to stop me with a question anytime. But Dwayne basically summed it up. We are at a process where, or at a timeline where there's been no response to anything. I understand the decision by council, and we've talked this as to whether or not council would like to acquire the entire property or just the building, which is the posture we sit right now. Regardless of whatever your decision is, we will go ahead with the notice of publication, and I will be filing at the same time a motion for summary judgment. The summary judgment motion will be reduced to a court order asking us to, with a finding that the building was worth $0 and that we are permitted to tear it down. From a Tort Claims Act perspective, once the town is following a judicial order, they're immune from liability, so there will not be any liability for following that court order. Yes.
And what's the timing of that decision by the court?
That will be, once I file, I'll be asking the court to put it on the roster, the clerk of court to put it on the roster as soon as possible. It would be at least probably 30 to 60 days, at most 120 days, depending on how full the roster is and when the next non-jury term of court is.
And you'll be filing that when, if you get authorization today? Once
you tell me exactly if we want to proceed with the taking in total or the taking in part. And once you tell me that, that's when it'll get filed.
So it's a matter of days?
Exactly.
Could be tomorrow. I mean,
yeah.
And that's not a difficult process to do. It'll take less than an hour to get that filed. So
And has the property been condemned?
it has been condemned. Now there's two senses, two uses of the word condemned. You have condemned in the sense that it's not fit for habitation, and you have condemned in terms of taking and paying just compensation under the Eminent Domain Act. We have filed the pleadings to take it under the Eminent Domain Act, which is required for just compensation to be paid for whatever interest we're taking in the property. At this point, we are taking just the building, and the interest has $0.
Publication, I assume, is in the local paper?
It is in a local paper, and it has to run for 3 weeks, 3 consecutive weeks.
The local paper being Ohio.
No, Charleston will be,
Charleston.
it'll be a Post and
So we have
Courier.
no more Ohio issues ahead of us.
No, I understand the taxes have been paid. We've sent notice to the addresses where the taxes are being paid, and we've had no response. Same thing with the mortgage holder, the fellow on Seabrook.
And the mortgage holder appears not to be alive. So how does that work in terms of having provided notification to a mortgage holder or his heirs?
Well, he holds the mortgage, and we have no, at least I have not found where he has an estate that's been filed, and I may be incorrect about that at this time, but all we're required to do is serve him notice of the pleadings or his estate, whatever address is given there, and then he still has that protected interest under the value of the property. I think his original mortgage was $232,000. So whatever's been paid, and I assume something's been paid, or at least he hasn't filed anything to foreclose on the mortgage, so I assume payments have been made. And what that principle is right now, I don't know.
But we're not on any way of squishy ground with the fact that we don't really know his status.
No, not at all. So we're not, his
I'm
interest.
sorry, can I stop? If you've got something, Dee, tell me, what is it? Yeah. So we believe he's dead.
Okay.
So he appears to be dead.
Well, then. Well, we could look in Florida to see if an estate's been filed. Just because someone's died their family's got to file that estate. And then it's their duty to determine what assets are held by that estate.
I'm just trying to make sure the town is on very solid ground.
That goes back to the notice of publication, which is why we're doing this publication by this service by publication, because it's just to cover every base that we have. And that is kind of the catch-all. We've served everybody at the addresses we have as required by statute. And the eminent domain statute that we fall under is not as strict in terms of service as your typical lawsuit, serving a lawsuit in a civil action. All we have to do is file or serve the last known address. And it's their duty to make sure that those addresses are updated.
And Chris,
Yes.
the last known address is based on what's at the county assessor's office, or
That's correct.
that's
yes.
where we pull that information
Yes,
from.
we've served every address we have possible. We've served the Turnberry address, the tax or the county's tax address where the tax bills are going, and we'll be serving by publication. So they're not going to have any issue with regard to a lack of service.
So the decision you need from us today is do we want to direct you to move forward to take the house, and which would give us the option to demolish that, or do we want to do a taking of the entire property? And if I could sort of update the rest of the council on some of the actions we've taken over the last couple of weeks, I think it's fair to say that about a week ago when we toured the house, I suspect that the sentiment of many of the council members was, geez, let's just take the whole thing. Let's get this property owner out of here, not someone that we want to work with. And I think we had hoped that we could find some sort of a workable economic way for the town to take the whole property. Personally, I think that's going to be difficult for us to do. What I've looked at a few things. One of the questions to do that is, if we take the whole property, we are going to have to give the court and therefore the property owner $300,000, which is the appraised value of the property. We know that we're going to have an additional $50,000 to maybe $60,000 of cost into that property for the demolition, for some nominal but appropriate level of landscaping of the property. and then whatever kinds of transaction costs would be involved in eventually marketing and selling the property. I've spent time trying to find whether there are any options for us to sell that property, to find someone who would be interested in that property in a way that we could do a direct transaction. So we've talked to the Conservancy. The Conservancy, I've had 3 or 4 conversations. They have 0 interest in the property. They'd be willing to take it for $100,000. That's not something we can do. So the Conservancy is out. I am comfortable at this point that there is not a likelihood that any of the real estate professionals or organizations in the area would likely be in a position to assist us in selling that property at anything other than the normal kinds of transaction cost. So we would have to net about $380,000 out of that property for the town to break even on its cost, and then we own the we're sitting there owning the property.
And we'd be responsible for taxes.
And we're
or would we
responsible.
not? I don't
Well,
know.
there are no,
Municipalities would pay
we
taxes.
would not pay property taxes on it during that period of time. The other option is that we simply move forward with demolishing the property. If we do that, I think we can, again, resolve the critical issue here, which is we have an unsightly and unsafe property. We can demolish that. We can do the necessary work to re-landscape. And my understanding is that we can put liens on the property for the cost that we incur. There are always issues or questions with respect to ultimately the eventual satisfaction of those liens and whether they can be what would be the
Challenged.
but there's a potential that the town at least breaks even. In which case then the responsibility for the maintenance of the lot would go back to the property owner. And I have spent a fair amount of time talking with the community association. If you look at the community association's rules and regulations, if you look at the covenants, the bylaws of the ARB and KICA, they, better than us, are in the position of having responsibility to enforce rules and regulations with respect to property maintenance. They have the ability to fine the property owner if they don't maintain the property. They have the ability to go in and expend their own monies to maintain the property, which we don't have, and then charge those back to the property owner. So if you go that approach, we have the potential of getting the property down, bringing the lot back to some appropriate condition, and then I think between the ARB and the community association, we have the proper rules and regulations that would allow would either put them in a position to either cause the property to be maintained or cause the property to be lost if the person doesn't pay the fines or whatever. So I think those are the 2 options that we have, and I think we need to have some discussion among the council members which direction we want to go.
Are you complete with your comments, Christopher, or do you have?
I am. I'm happy to answer any questions as they come up.
You've
outlined. You've been
choices.
very succinct and accurately outlined in both options. So.
Chris, assuming we simply take and destroy the house, then and once we have all our costs identified, then you would file a lien on the property.
We can do that. Yes.
Or somebody.
Somebody would. Yeah.
Okay. And then the subsequent buyer comes along, and obviously they're going to find out that there is a lien on the property.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can they take that property subject to the lien, and the lien still exists? Or
Yes.
do they have to satisfy the lien?
In order to get clear title, they would have to satisfy those liens. So if any closing attorney, and I know Dwayne's done a lot of closing, this lien is going to pop up, and they're not going to close unless those liens are satisfied or waived, or you can negotiate them. I mean, you can do anything with them.
Okay.
Now, in the event that the house is torn down, at this point, as I envision, 6 months from now or whatever the time frame is, you now have a driveway that's gone because the demolition includes the removal of the concrete. So there is some remediation landscaping that would need to be done.
Yes.
To bring it back to, it's not a natural state, because the empty lot next to me is wooded, it's beautiful.
Right.
In this case, it would be a lot that would have some grass in the front, and then really would go pretty natural in the back. And who's responsible for maintaining that?
Well, that's, the association can maintain it and charge that back to the landowner. And if they don't pay it in their monthly dues, then it could be attached as a lien.
I asked Jimmy yesterday via email if KICA would do that, and he said they would. And then
Okay.
they can charge it back. I mean,
Yep.
that's how he answered the email, that they would, maintain it or make sure that it looks decent until it becomes forest again or becomes more natural again.
Okay.
And I don't believe, I like that option rather than, a lot of communities will fine the homeowner $100 a day or something until the stuff is, the conditions are fixed. I think doing it this way, it ends up being less cost to the homeowner in the long run, but it also looks a lot better from the town to take that approach.
And if I understand this correctly, if the town council moves forward on this and we eventually bring the house down, the town is then removed from that issue going forward. The maintenance of that property or any contact with the homeowner is really out of our jurisdiction. Is that correct?
It'll be with the homeowners association, whatever association is in charge of collecting dues will be dealing with the owner.
And the reason the town's been involved is because we have a governmental authority to do this, whereas Kika does not have that authority.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct. You have the town has the power to exercise eminent domain, whereas the association does not. That's correct.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I would support the first move, which is to take the house and not take the property. I don't think it's fiscally as responsible as to take the property as opposed to simply taking the house, lien the property, and move forward. And then if Kika has helped with long-term maintenance, and I would assume the neighbors may even put a lawnmower on top of that grass every once in a while, that's what I would be supportive of.
Diana, any thoughts?
Exactly the same, which is why I asked Jimmy yesterday, because I don't see any point in the town. I think John actually made the point in an email that why should we buy this from the owner and take all of, basically reward them almost for not doing anything and putting us in this position.
Yeah, you would relieve him of his property
Right,
taxes
right.
and Kika
Yep.
dues, which he still pays both of.
Which he pays, so
Some strangers.
Yeah.
I would support just buying just demolishing the house also.
And one other question, Chris, if we do that, and if we do some remediation in terms of filling sod in where the empty driveway was or dirt after a certain space, are we trespassing?
No, the condemnation, well, there's two issues, and the condemnation allows you to enter the property for any reason with regard to demolishing and fixing the condition, removing the house. Now, after that point, that's an HOA or an association issue with going and maintaining the property. And I don't believe, I'm sure it's in their covenants that they're allowed to maintain that property if it's neglected.
Shannon's shaking her head, yes.
Yes.
For the record.
Is there once we demolish it though, do we have to do any restoration within like 30 days or 60 days? Is there a rule?
No,
as to when
there's nothing, in terms of the Eminent Domain Act, no. Now, you'd have the association rules, which are a different ballgame, but with the state statutes under the Eminent Domain Act, there is no requirement.
Stephanie, a question for you. I know we received some multiple bids on demolition. Does it include the removal of the driveway itself?
Yes.
Okay.
I would agree with Chris and Diana and John's email as well, with the only caveat I would do it as soon as possible. As soon as legally, the publication date's over. And I mean, I would send out the bids to have it raised now.
We have the 3 bids already, and I've already talked with Mr. Murphy in regards to the processing, and I've asked him, and he will do it, and he said that to try to help expedite the judgment.
The hearing, yes.
The hearing. I know that he said that we'll at least have to wait 3 weeks, because once he gets the word today and he files the publication notice, then we have to wait 3 weeks, and then he's going to try to see if we can have a court date set shortly after that. But again, it depends on the on the court date docket, or the court docket in terms of the earliest we can get on. But he's aware that we would like to have this expedited as opposed to waiting the 90 or 120 days.
And the contractor that, or contractors that we're considering for demolition, can they do it quickly?
Well,
after
we will have to, once we get word from council today, then what we'll have to do is that Bruce will go to the lowest bidder, because ultimately it will come back to Ways and Means to approve that contractor, and then we'll have to let them know this might be the date that we're looking time frame, and then it's really based on their schedule.
Okay.
But we will reiterate the fact that we would like for them to do it as soon as possible.
All right, well, and I don't want to put Shannon on the spot because Jimmy's not here, and I don't know that she's able to speak for him, but we did approach the community association and had discussions about whether they would share with us in the cost of demolition and the cost of helping do initial reclamation of the property. We weren't able to reach a conclusion on that I think would allow us to go forward on the assumption that we were sharing a cost. So I think at this point, any action we're taking is on the presumption that whatever costs are going to be associated with this, the town will assume all of those costs. We will assume the cost we will assume the cost of the demolition. We will assume the cost of any initial reclamation of the property. But Shannon, am I correct? All of my reading of both the ARB and KICA's rules and regulations of the covenants is that we are correct in presuming that once that is done, that KICA is positioned to take on the enforcement responsibility for that property in terms of maintenance, look, feel, and be the appropriate conduit between the neighbors and any concerns that they might have over that property going forward. Am I wrong? Correct. Got that down, Petra?
All right. I assume, I assume that we'll need a motion to have legal authority be given to the lawyers to file paperwork. Is that correct?
Right. And I'm going to do, if I can, if this is not out of order, I'd just like to do one other thing. While it's not on the agenda, we do have some members of the Turnberry neighborhood here. If there is anyone who has any comment you would like to make at this point, I'm not asking you to or not, but if you feel like it, go ahead.
My name is Denise Wardle. I live at 130 Turnberry, and everybody on the council knows who I am because I've been the one that's been pushing this. I would like to do two things. First of all, I would like to thank the entire council. You have all worked very hard to make this happen. I would particularly like to thank Chris and Stephanie and Dwayne because they have spearheaded making this all happen. And it really has been a blight on our neighborhood, not for 1 year, but for about 7 years. I've been working to have this done, first with Kika and Marilyn Olson and Bruce for 2 years, and then the town for 2 more. So I am very, very grateful that we finally are going to get some resolution. The only thing that I would like is when you legally have the time, I would like to share that with my neighbors because that is obviously a consideration for us. You've all been in the house, you know how bad it is, and we would like very much to have it down as soon as possible. So thank you very much.
Okay. Anything else?
Is there an adoption program for the rats? I mean, is somebody going to take them?
Yes, I had Ricky have them adopted.
All right, I'm going to suggest that we do 2 separate motions. Oh, I'm sorry, did we have?
Comment.
I'm Laura Burt, and we own the house at 123 Turnberry.
Oh, we're sorry.
And my only question is, one, will be given notice, but 2, is there any ability to exterminate before it is brought down so that we don't have rodents all over our street? That's my biggest concern.
Yeah, I'm with you.
We'll figure it out.
Shannon just was mouthing something.
Okay.
And you'll continue that up until the time that the home is demolished. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. Of course. Jimmy on this. Ricky Miller Pest Control has been in there 3 times. They have put out more bait than
he's, according to Jimmy, he is supposed to continue on with that
That's real.
control until September, is what Jimmy told me, until the house comes.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna divide this into two motions. The first, on the action, authorizing our legal counsel to move forward and file, and take all the necessary actions to file to demolish this property. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
So that gives our legal counsel the authority that you need.
Yes.
And then second, even though I realize some of these expenditures will be a while off, what I'd like to do is also make a motion, I'd go ahead and make the motion to authorize the town administrator to incur cost up to $50,000 plus any attorney's fees that we've incurred to date, to be used for the cost of demolition and to be used for the cost of any appropriate and necessary re-landscaping of the property, to be determined under discussion between the ARB and KICA, but to give them the authorization to go ahead and spend those monies up to $50,000.
Plus attorney fees.
Plus attorney's
attorney fees.
fees
Mhm.
incurred to date.
Yeah.
So
Have you made that motion?
I just made that motion.
I'll
Do I have a-
second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Okay, you look like you were gonna say something.
Is 50,000, well, I guess if she goes through the $50,000, she just comes back.
And she can come back. And-
Fine.
And the 50 is plus the attorney's fees. So
Yeah.
I think based on the RFPs that we have,
Fees were 35 to 50.
35.5 is the lowest.
Is the
the
low
lowest,
bid.
yeah.
Okay, so that should cover the maintenance, I mean, whatever.
Landscaping.
Yeah.
Facade and stuff.
she can always come back.
Yeah,
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, with that, we are done with new business. Town administrators,
I don't have any, I just wanted, just for the records, in your first motion, you all approved for demolition. Technically, both options include demolition, so I just wanted to be clear for the record, that's partial demolition, do not take the property.
You were not buying the
it
property.
was, it was demolition only, not
Yes.
taking the property. Right.
My only update that I have, if you all have not had an opportunity. Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't step on Diana's toes. The communications in our wildlife department has released its fifth video series, so please go on our YouTube channel and also our website. It is, this month it's on painted buntons, so it's really interesting. It is our Wild About video series that Jim Jordan and Stephanie Braswell has put together, so please take a look at that. That's it.
All right, council member committee updates and general comments. Diana, I'll start with you.
The first Arts Council program of, can you hear me? Is this going through? Of this fiscal year, Marantz, Let the Good Times Roll, was on 7/23, and we sold 425 tickets. Our next concert is sold out already to Charleston Jazz Motown on August 12th, Sunday, August 12th. Yeah, this Sunday. The Sea Level Rise report will be presented to the Environmental Committee on 8/14 for their approval, and then that report will be presented to the September Town Council meeting. In July, Jim, Aaron, and several employees of the KICA Lakes Department participated in our annual alligator survey. The results are not yet available, but over the last few years, we've maintained a base of about 600 alligators, so that'll probably remain about the same. And the first draft of the native plant database is under review by the Kiowa Landscaping Work Group Committee. That's a subcommittee of the Environmental Committee. The committee plans to launch this new Kiowa resource on 10/15 at a Conservation Matters program. The information will be available on the town website, eventually in a searchable, user-friendly form, but initially it may just be a PDF file until they get that done.
Okay. Chris?
The Public Safety Committee met on July 18th. Fire Chief Waltz reported that the construction of Station 6 near Flyway is now expected to be completed no sooner than September, most likely October, and could go as long as November. There remains an upcoming vacancy on the St. John's Fire Department Commission. That vacancy is expected to be posted in October, but if there are any residents from Kiowa who may be interested in filling that position, please see me or the mayor. Regarding St. John's Fire District, they have secured, they believe, 2 QRVs, which are quick response vehicles, through a bond issue. The expectation is that one of those vehicles will be stationed on Kiowa, possibly as early as December. You can think of a QRV as an ambulance without transport capability. This should help with response time and is a significant enhancement to the emergency services for Kiowa residents. And Beach Patrol has relocated out of the town's garage as of this weekend and are now into their new facility behind Fire Station number 4 off Sora Rail. On the Communications Committee, there are 2 publications that are due out by the end of this month. The town's Budget at a Glance brochure, which will inform residents how the money is collected and spent, and a 1-page Maze of K's explanation. Stephanie Braswell is putting the finishing touches on both those issues. And finally, a conference call was held with the County Council Chair Rawl and Councilman Quayle, between the mayor and Stephanie and I, regarding the shift of police model. That continues to be an ongoing discussion, and we're trying to work our way through that process. That's all.
Okay.
I have nothing.
All right. With that, I'll open it back up to citizens' comments. I'm watching Wendy to see if she's getting up.
Wendy Kulik, 38 Marsh Edge Lane. I don't know if this is a question or a request. Unfortunately, the town can't do anything about the volumes of rain that we have received over the last God knows how long. But the parts of the bike path, like from the entrance to Cacique to Freshfields, almost that whole stretch was flooded for close to a week. And there were stanchions that I'm sure the town is responsible for putting there to kind of block it off. My suggestion is, since we know that's going to keep recurring because we can't do anything about stopping it, if there were some way, either a banner on the town's website or an e-blast to people, because we have a lot of people on the island who bike to Freshfields. I mean, that's one of the reasons that path was put in the first place. And it could be really dangerous riding a bike through that, or if you've got little kids and you're walking there. So my suggestion would be that in the future, when that floods, to get a notice out to people so that they don't leave home expecting they're going to walk or bike it and then discover there are problems.
We're hopeful that actually we have resolved that issue. One of the things that exacerbated that was there was a drain, and Rusty can stop me if I'm wrong, but we had a drainage problem there, including a drainage duct that went from there all the way almost to the Cacique entrance that was clogged. We were not, I think everybody saw the water sat there for about 4 or 5 days because the one contractor, I think that we and Kika shares, could not get to that location for a few days. But if you notice, they were in there last week. We signed a contract with them last week, both to go in and clean out the drain and also to go back in and inspect it. So we actually had a drainage problem there. That is in the process of being resolved. So hopefully we will not actually have water sitting there like that. But if we do in the future, I think your suggestion is a good one.
Thank you.
Rusty, did I get that correct? Is that where we stand on that drain?
Yes, sir. And that drain, excuse me, that drainage system will be looked at under the Parkway project. If we have to add or resize that, because at the present time, there's an 18-inch pipe that carries all the water from the inbound side of the Parkway as well as the field, beyond the PGA parking field. That water goes through that pipe and then out to the marsh.
Yeah.
So we're hoping to, when we do the Parkway, incorporate some new piping.
I mean, we even had officers there one day because the
bicyclists were actually going out into the middle of the road and trying to go around, so, okay.
What caused it? I mean, what did they find out was stopping the drain?
Debris, mulch.
Mulch.
Pine
needles.
limbs, because all the water comes down that swale, and there's that 18-inch pipe goes across the parkway, and then it goes back to the marsh area. So the pipe was just,
It's clogged.
Is it too small too? I mean, you probably might.
it really needs that, if it's carrying that much water, we really need to address a larger pipe. The pipes that are in the ground now are 35 or more years old. So when the time they put them in, they sized them for the area.
All right, any
Mayor?
other citizens' comments? All right, with that.
I just have
there's-
one comment, please. I forgot in my updates. I wanted to let everyone know, tomorrow at the Planning Commission meeting, which they meet at 3 o'clock, we're going to have representatives from Big Rock Partners. They're going to do a presentation on the senior living facility that's going to be built on Freshfield. So if you'd like to hear anything about that project, they're going to do a presentation tomorrow before the Planning Commission at 3 p.m. That's it.
All right, we have no executive session, so with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah, presentation is here. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
They were asking where the location of the presentation.
Oh, okay. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, Chris?
Oh, and I've been there in Barbados.